Welcome in, folks. Today's episode of Beyond the Turnouts. We have life on the ambulance and beyond. The caregiver who needed help, but there wasn't help being given. Barb, tell me what's one of them stories that you got that just sticks with you?
There's one particular story, and this is right after I became a medic. I got a call for unconscious person. I get there. This lady met us at the door. She's like, my husband is not moving. He's not awake. I go in the bedroom, and he was beyond resuscitation efforts. He had died sometimes during the night. She thought he had already gone up, got to work, and it had been hours. My supervisor did beat us there. He did not cancel us. He says, because you needed this. You needed this call. She needed you because you had been through this. And so that sticks in my mind that I was able to be the comfort for that person because I had been in her shoes.
Yeah. Did you feel like you were ready to give that compassion?
Yes, because it's who I am. I'm, if anything, I'm a caregiver. I can give out hugs all day long. I may have to figure out what's going on and what treatments need to be done, but the compassionate piece just comes natural for me.
And I can honestly say, after working with you for quite a number of years now, that is definitely a good part of who you are. With speaking on who you are, so that way the audience actually can kind of get a feel for who our guest is today. You're a paramedic here locally. You've been doing that for a few years now. You're an author. Wrote some children's books earlier this year, which is an awesome thing. You are an educator, and you're a business owner. Do you have time to sleep?
I have 4 full-time jobs, so I do get plenty of rest when needed. I feel like I am in the best spot in my entire life right now, and I feel like everything just landed in its place. And sometimes it takes us a little while to find those pieces and how they fit together.
So when you say landed together, when I first met you, you were teaching full-time and part-time on the ambulance. How did that transition occur to where you're at now?
So what pushed me back into EMS full-time was COVID. Being an EMT, I worked for the state. I worked in a very unique situation with COVID. So the building that I worked in, 100% COVID positive people. It was just us workers who took the extra precautions, and we cared for all of those people who were not sick enough to be in a hospital, yet they couldn't live in congregate settings. So that made me go back into EMS full time. Had the opportunity to go to work part-time for an ambulance service after COVID was said and done. My class thrived on blended learning, where we met a couple of times through the semester and did the rest of it online. My classes worked that well. So that transitioned from me being in the classroom full-time to being out on the streets full-time.
Do you ever feel like, since we've transitioned and done this blended, that part of the network and the what we have here, where we can call each other and get that support as we've grown in our careers from the trainings and stuff, do you ever feel like you're missing that aspect on those early days?
Yeah, absolutely. I knew that whenever we had our state EMS conference, it tried to go virtual through COVID, but you get so much more when you're actually in there, and people lose that human connection. That disappeared during COVID, and we're 5 years later, 6 years, almost 6 years, we are starting getting back to that human connection. I think a lot of people thrive, and they are starting to come back around and not using technology. Now, the technology we're using is getting more sophisticated. But you have a lot more interaction. Even when you try to do stuff online, you have that human connection. And that's something we can't get rid of, is you can't get rid of that true face-to-face. How do you don't get inflection on your emails and stuff like that. And so it's great.
We've all sent that email that needed some inflection that didn't get there.
Very much so.
So that's one of the things we didn't talk about, is you are part of the AMTA Association. You've been doing that for a few years as well. So what's something you guys are doing when we're talking about, the future of EMS? I know you guys have some things in progress,
Hmm.
and you're trying to help build it. But what's some of the things you guys are currently working on? Not just on getting that human interaction back, so that way we were getting that peer-to-peer contact, but also, developing on the mental health struggles and those pieces. We do and have always been so focused on how to be better providers, how to be better leaders.
Hmm.
But I've seen a shift lately, and kind of walk us through some of those things you guys are doing.
So there's one key word you just said, the mental health. The mental health aspect of it, we are trying to push more classes to make us realize that says, hey, sometimes we need help ourselves, and there's no shame in asking for that help. Being a part of the EMT Association, and they do a memorial every year
Mm-hmm.
at the conference. It's alarming at the number of people. We're up to 22 people on our memorial for this year already, and
Wow.
it's not even half the year yet. But the thing is, there's a small percentage of those that have struggled to the end with mental health.
Mm-hmm.
I myself needed to reach out and get some help. Didn't exactly get the help I needed. A lot of things happened in my life very suddenly, and it all happened out of my control, and I needed somebody to talk to. I am a super fan of being a peer support person.
Yeah.
If you need to pick up the phone and call me at 2 a.m., I will be there for you. If I need to drive over to you because you need a hug, I will come over there. I've had coworkers call and says, "Can you stop by our station? I just need to talk to you for a minute." Because this EMT just fished a unborn child that just spontaneously was born in a toilet. That's the stuff EMS comes in contact with, and she didn't know how to process it.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, I just need you. I just need a hug. I need to talk through this. And after we sat there, we talked through it. She cried. She got a hug. She's like, okay, I know that's part of life. I know sometimes that stuff happens. I said, but I had never seen it before. And so just being there for my coworkers
Yeah.
is a huge component, but it goes beyond what I can do for them. Sometimes we do need to talk to other people.
So what? Yeah, you gave us a lot to unpack there. I want to start with some of the easier ones first. When you were talking about how you are that peer support for a lot of people, what has EMS historically given you uh, and trained you to be that outside of your general nature of being a compassionate human being? What is EMS actually giving you? Like we give all these tools, right? These
Hmm.
tools in the toolbox. Has there been any tools that it's actually given you through your core training, or is it just kind of something you picked up?
It's kind of something I've picked up. And then I also enroll in extra education classes.
Mm-hmm.
I will seek out other classes to take on my own. Some of the services I have worked for in the past, they just didn't have the best structure
Yeah.
on getting help to those people, but it's the other resources in your community that you need to be aware of.
Mm-hmm.
As a certified health education specialist, I am a resource person.
Yeah.
So having access to what's available and me to pass that off to another person, I'm always going to tell you, does your employer have an EAP? Do they have an employee assistance program that has mental health capabilities? That I'm going to ask that straight off the bat. Doesn't matter who you work for. If you work in construction, you work in EMS, you work in the education system, that's going to be my first question.
Yeah.
I've had students come to me. I have one of those faces, those personalities. And when they have enough trust in you to just come to you and ask you those deep questions, you need to be able to give them some resources. So a lot of the training that I have sought on my own.
So that is an awesome characteristic that most people wouldn't have done.
Hmm.
Kudos on that. Uh, no names, but you mentioned another aspect there that I kind of want to unpack a little bit, if we can. You were needing help but didn't have it. And yes, I understand. I don't want to name names or anything, but in today's society, we have realized that mental health is a bigger component to job satisfaction, job retention,
Hmm.
and just overall life, right? We don't want to take this stuff home to our families and our friends and, not have a normal life when we're not on the job, whether you're an EMS or not, right? You were talking
Right.
about it, it affects everybody. Um, what was it like being in that position where you didn't have support from leadership and didn't have an out when you were needing help? Like, what was that?
Yeah, so I asked for our local employee assistance program number. They gave it to me and they're like, "Is everything okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I just need to work through some stuff." My mother-in-law had passed away. My husband was taking it very difficult and he called me. He says, "I'm going to Louisiana." I didn't know if he was coming back, didn't know how long he was going to be gone. He went to his brother's house and had to process his mother's death. Um, when I left a message for EAP, it was about 2 weeks before they called me back.
Oh, wow.
So, leaving a message for them to call me, they didn't have the story. They didn't know why I needed help. But yet that was the phone number I was given to call to leave a message. So that was very concerning when they never called me back. When they finally did, I'm like, it's too late. I don't need, it's okay. I did find that I needed to call them again. And so I called them and I could hear them eating on the phone. They're like, "Now, who do you work for?" And so I was answering all the questions. "Now, where are you at? What'd you say your name was?" And it's almost like they weren't paying attention. They were a third party service
Mm-hmm.
that they just took messages. So I'm like, "It's okay. It was a mistake to call you. I will call somebody else." And so I did find a counseling service that worked for me. It worked for my schedule. It worked for me. And I have them on speed dial. They know that if I call, then I'm going through something. Is it my education? Is it my personal job? Is it family? Is it work? I can talk about them about all of my aspects of life.
Yeah.
And they will give me the tools um, to try to work through those things and assist me. And so when I called them and I told them, "Hey, never mind, it was okay. I don't need your help." And it was after another particular call that happened to be a cardiac arrest, and I was just struggling with the whole call because it was the first cardiac arrest that I worked after I lost my husband,
Mm-hmm.
which he died from cardiac arrest.
Yeah.
And I was on duty the day that they called me and they said, "You need to come to the hospital." So it was a lot to unpack and it was a lot to go down that road, but yet there wasn't anybody on the other end of the line that I could really talk to in the moment.
What was going through your mind during that time frame when you realized that your EAP wasn't an EAP? I've never once heard of an EAP where you leave a voicemail. That almost sounds like you're just trying to phone a buddy who's overseas working, right?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. That's what it was. It was just a third party call, and I was just like, "Well, this isn't what I need." And luckily, I had other resources with other avenues that I could get the help.
Mm-hmm.
But my primary job, working in EMS at the time, they failed me. They
Yeah.
failed me, and it hurt. And you looking at the numbers of our memorial right now today, and how many of those were self-inflicted losses. Could those have been prevented if somebody picked up the phone?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a huge component and I will always be there for anyone. In fact, one of the books that I wrote, I started a special email, and that email is in the book.
Oh,
And
I
it's
didn't know
about
this.
my husband dying from cardiac arrest.
Yeah.
It's When the Heart Stops. And I check that email regularly. If anybody who reads that book needs to reach out,
Mm-hmm.
they will get me directly.
I did not know this.
Hmm.
So when your husband died, I know you were already starting to see counseling right at that time.
Hmm.
How did that impact your ability on the job to process calls this job isn't easy. We talk
No,
about it,
yeah.
but how did it affect that side of this?
So a coworker lost his spouse
Mm-hmm.
3 weeks before I lost Lonnie. We sat down and we talked. He came back to work. I came back to work, and I just happened to be working on the truck with him one day. And he's like, "How did you know you were ready to come back?" And I said, "I couldn't sit and look at the walls anymore." I said, "I'm one of those people, I don't do well sitting. I am one of those people who thrive. I throw myself into my work, probably unhealthy as far as working as much as I did at the time." I said, "But I couldn't stay at home."
Mm-hmm.
He's like, "I didn't know if I was ready or not." He's like, "I started by moving clothes out of the closet." I said, okay. I said, I haven't moved not a single piece of clothing yet. I said, I'm not ready to move the clothing. He's like, I just canceled our trip overseas. We were fixing to go on a anniversary trip. And so he was sharing his story with me.
Yeah.
And it was fresh for both of us. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, 3 weeks prior to my husband passing away, he lost his wife. And he had been married a lot longer than I have, but it hurt the same. So
Yeah.
it didn't matter how long each of us were married. We had a common story. And I think it gave him a little bit of, I don't want to say light. I don't want to say comfort.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it gave him just a little bit of clarity to talk to somebody who was actually in the same shoes he was.
Yeah. That
So,
peer on peer.
and that's why I'm so supportive. If somebody is willing to be a peer support person,
Yeah.
official capacity or non-official capacity, that right there speaks volumes when you have somebody who's walking in those same shoes.
It definitely does make a difference. Over the course of many of our conversations,
Mm-hmm.
you've been there as a peer for me because we've walked into some of the situations that I had been in, or it's vice versa, where I had, and were able to discuss it. Uh, when you were doing these peer conversations with a lot of your colleagues, and you probably still doing them even today, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything that you would tell people just to be mindful of on that side of it, or to help guide that process? Anything special that they need to be thinking of?
You can't assume how that other person feels.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to have the compassion to sit there and listen and be understanding. You don't have to walk in their shoes. You don't have to know how they feel. You just have to be there for that person. And one of the things, another coworker had lost their life, and I told another coworker, don't ask her what she needs. And because when my husband died,
Yeah.
people called and said, what do you need? I'm like, I don't know what I need. Said, honestly, the worst, and I have a conversation with Lonnie about this still. I'm
Yeah.
like, why did you die after lunch the day before Thanksgiving? I said, that's the worst day in the entire world to die. I said, because you can't plan anything. I didn't know what to tell people. And so I told my coworkers, I'm like, you see something that needs to be done
Mm-hmm.
and they haven't thought about it, say, hey, I'm going to take care of this for you. Don't ask what needs to be done because that person can't think. I couldn't think. I couldn't think on the day of Thanksgiving
Yeah, it's a lot to
because
process.
nothing is open. I can't make plans. I don't even know to tell you when the visitation is. When you see something that needs to be done, say, hey, I see that this needs to be done. I'm going to take care of this for you. Are you okay with that?
Mm-hmm.
That right there is the best way to help somebody.
So, what about when you went to actually start getting counselors? Obviously, the EAP failed you. I can't even imagine what that was like. But I know what it was like the first time I called for counseling. I'd gone to a mentor and he gave me a number. It was the instant counseling here in Greenbrier. But for me, when my mindset was going, it was very hard because I had grown up in a culture of the stigmas and, you're weak when you call for help and, all those things. What were you going through in that time? Because you just found it on your own. You went and sought it, whereas it kind of got pushed on me.
Yeah. So a lot of things happened all at once. So I had started paramedic school.
Mm-hmm.
We had lost our instructor, our program director, our medical director. Didn't know if we were going to be able to finish paramedic school, period.
It's a lot to unpack.
And that's when Lonnie decided to die,
Yeah.
decided to leave me. He promised me 42 years and he's yet to deliver. But that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
But losing your vision at the end of paramedic school was in the air. My husband had died. I did not know which way to turn.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I didn't get the phone call and I hung up and said, no, this is a mistake, I searched and I found it's online, but you video chat with them. And it worked well with my schedule because, again, I did not intend on giving up going to school. I did not intend on giving up my job. I wasn't going to roll over because my husband left me because I still had two special needs adult children that needed my help that just lost their father. My mother has moved in with me. So I had a lot of stress in my life at the time. And thank God that I can count on one hand how many people I work with reached out and gave me some sort of support.
Mm-hmm.
You, one of your companions, another coworker actually came to the funeral, and a couple other people that I worked with. Those are the only people that I seen during that time that my husband died and I was going through all that.
Yep.
So I kept going to counseling to myself because I needed that for me. Not everybody else needed to know that. But then people ask, you look like you're doing good. What are you doing? How are you coping? And I will be honest. I told him, I said, I found this counseling. It worked for me because not all counseling is the same.
Mm-hmm.
You will have to find who matches with you,
Yep.
who you feel comfortable talking to. Do you want that face to face? Do you want that video chat? Do you want to just type and text somebody? There's so many avenues for help. You got to find the right one for you. And with my schedule and the way things worked, I wanted the human connection, but I couldn't find that face to face banking hours.
Mm-hmm.
So I found a lady who would video chat with me at 8 p.m.
Wow.
So we had our counseling sessions at 8 p.m.
Yeah.
once a week, and it was live video chat.
So you still had part of that.
Yes. She was able to hear my inflection and some of the words. She could tell. She's like, well, now when you said that, you sound frustrated. So let's break that down. And so she could hear, and it's not like you're texting like a bot system.
Yeah.
And that worked for me. Now, that may not work for you. It may not work for the next person, but there will be one other person out there who it does work for.
Yeah.
And they need to know that there's other ways to get that help.
You know, me personally, I've never done the video chat. I actually didn't know it was that interpersonal still. You know, I go, next week I'm going again. I go now every other week. I was going every week. And I like the in-person. I go in there. I got my spot on the couch. I sit down. I grab my pillow because there's some times where it gets a little rough. But that's what's worked for me. But hearing that, if I ever get into another pinch, because the last 3 weeks have been very busy. You know, I've had to skip my appointment that was last week because I was out of state doing a video that I was telling you about with the National Volunteer Council. So I had to cancel my appointment, knowing that is an option potentially with mine. I might have to discuss that with her because that 3 weeks I can tell. I'm not gonna lie, I can tell. I haven't been there, you know. But when you were talking about all that, and it's something that we don't necessarily talk about on the forefront because this job is so much, but we all have stress, right? Every kind of stress compounds. You know, I always tell people when I'm talking to them and they come to me for peer support, I always tell them, think of a coffee cup. You know, bad stress is big drops. Sometimes good stress is big drops, but most of the time it's little drops. It's more like a rain shower. It just kind of steadily trickles in, but it's always going to fill up. But you were talking about, you know, with the two adults that you have to take care of now that you're in charge of after he passed away, and your mom moving in with you. You know, it's an oftentimes forgotten piece of that puzzle, especially with our work. It's just expected. That's normal life. You know, we eventually take care of our parents and, you know, all those things. How does that weigh in when you were talking about managing and going through that tough time? Because that was huge. You know, not everyone has that, and not everyone can manage that in a normal lifetime, let alone with everything else you had going on.
I mean, my life is so great. The boys, they are special needs, but yet they can live by themselves. I am now 2.5 years out from my husband passing away.
Yeah.
That I will check on them monthly now.
Oh, wow.
So I was halfway living with them, halfway living at my house.
It was a lot of travel.
There was a lot of travel, and being 50 minutes apart, that took out my sleep. That took out my study time because they needed my undivided attention when I was there. So now I have backed off. They will text me, check up on. I'll text them, check up on. I try to go visit them every other month.
Yeah.
So we are down to doing things on an as needed basis where it was more constant right at the very beginning when it was fresh. My mom, she can still get around. She can do stuff. It's almost like my mama's my live-in maid. She makes my life and she will ask me, do you need me to do anything while you're at work? You know, so working 48 hours, she will do my laundry while I'm gone. So it's almost like mom's helping me by
Yeah.
living with me.
So it sounds like she's taking some of that stress off, actually.
She is. And God love my mama. She's a saint, because she's like, now I will do anything you need me to do. She's like, do you need me to cook you some food and make you some meals and meal prep for you? I'm like, no, mom, I got that. I was like, I left a load of laundry in there. If you'll finish it for me, that'd be great.
I need that in my life.
I know.
I got a load of laundry back there to finish this afternoon. Oh, that's awesome. So, kind of pivot a little bit. When we talk mental health and we talk about first responders, this is something that I didn't realize until I want to say it was about a week after I was spiraling, but right when I was finally getting help. You know, I'm over volunteer firefighters for the state of Arkansas. And this county right here is my department. There's no legislation that mandates mental health. Well, when I was digging into that as well, there's nothing that makes private EMS take care of their folks either.
No.
And, that was a huge eye opener for me because I worked full time on an ambulance for a long time, just assumed that the companies I was working for had my back, that legislation was there. I understood we weren't classified as an essential service, but I just figured and assumed, like most people probably do, they're listening, that we're taken care of, but we're not in those aspects. Have you worked on any of that? Because you're so involved in a lot of stuff.
I am, and I will tell you that you're going to see more and more resources. You're going to hear it talked about more coming in the future. Hopefully legislation will change eventually. It is not there yet. The thing is we see a lot.
Yeah.
We do what is called debriefings after large events. A couple years ago, it's been over a year ago now, that we had a big shooting.
Yep.
In one of our surrounding counties. There was a debrief. We had a large house fire where people lost their lives.
Yeah.
There was a debrief. We have a hostage situation where somebody was shot. That person got loose, went and shot somebody else.
Yep.
There was a debrief. Something large, they will bring all the entities that were involved in that situation and do a debrief. What we don't do is, this is your first day on the job. You're a brand new EMT. I'm so sorry that you just got thrown in this mess. You just worked a cardiac arrest that you've never seen before. Plus, you just went to a car accident that was a fatality, was your very next call. I'm so sorry you're a new EMT, but this is the job. That's what some of these people are getting. That person needs a debrief too. That's a lot to weigh on a brand new EMT who hasn't been out in the field, just got released from orientation, and is now driving an ambulance for the very first time on her own. We need services, and we need to check on those people to make sure they're okay. That's something we let fall through the cracks.
You talk about that like it's not a real story, but for those listening in, that's actually a real thing and a real person who was 18, if I remember right, at the time. And that horrible situation is what I was actually bridging into the next thing I was going to talk about. And that's, for me, something I've been figuring out and trying to put into place for my agency. And, the agency you work for now, as well as, as a partner agency with us. It's how can we make the future better for these people that are coming up? Because we have cadet programs and you all teach a lot of brand new EMTs, but when I look at our training portfolios right now, it's great. I mean, we teach them how to do the job and how to be successful at it and the career paths that they can have, not just on the box or on the fire engine, just all the things. We give them all the tools and resources, but nowhere in my firefighter 1 and 2 pathway does it talk about how to be mentally fit or what the call is going to be like. We'll throw some things out there. You're going to see some dead bodies, or you're going to see people burn up in cars or house fires. We throw these crazy little shots out there, like throwing them at a dartboard, but we don't really ever just zero in and go for broke and actually break it down for them.
So I have been through EMT school, advanced EMT school, paramedic school. I teach EMT, advanced EMT instructor, and out of all of these textbooks, One section out of one chapter talks about the health of the caregiver. There are no trainings unless we seek them out.
Mm-hmm.
We have to seek out and have a good resource person so that they know that they're not alone. The thing is we don't offer that up freely. We don't tell them straight up out of the gate, hey, we did all this training. Now you're released out into the world. Go forth. Don't kill anybody. Do the best you can. Be that caring, compassionate person. But that one incident is going to happen. And now they don't know how to take care of themselves.
Yeah.
Did we, in all the years of training and in their education and in the textbooks, did we really hone in on how to take care of themselves? And the answer is no, we didn't. And going through all the education that I have, until something happens, we don't teach it.
Mm-hmm.
And we're beyond that right now.
Yeah.
So the new EMTs, if you're going through EMT school, you're going through EMR, you're going to be a volunteer. One of the best things that you can do is like talk to whoever, your chief, your captain, your supervisor, saying, hey, I had this call. It's not setting well with me. I want to talk about it. I feel like I need to talk through it. I have a brand new EMT partner. He has just got out of EMT school. He is green. And I told him, I said, if you see something I do on scene, you don't understand what happened, it doesn't sit well with you, our safe space is the cab of this truck.
Yep.
I said, you have my full blessing to yell at me when we get in the truck. And it's like, oh my God, I don't know what just happened. I need to talk about this, because I've done that to my partners.
Yep.
And I'm like, can we debrief that call? Because I just got to talk about what we just did. And, I've given that to him freely. And he has been an EMT released. See, we've been partners for right at a month now.
Awesome.
And so he knows that he can talk to me about anything and everything. And I told him, I said, we will have a shift and we will have a theme.
Mm-hmm.
I said, and we will run calls in that theme all day long, as the EMS gods just give it to us that way. And this past shift, it was all about smells.
Oh.
So everything that we touched, called, toted, it had a smell involved with it.
Ooh.
And one of the biggest things is we figured out that one of the freezers at the station got unplugged.
Oh.
And it was full of rotten meat. And so we were having phantom smells on subsequent calls until we figured it out. So, even though we had a safe space, he said, did you take a shower? I'm like, did you take a shower? So it was a safe space.
Yep.
And just that's the funny side of it. But in all honesty, he knows that he has, and my previous partner that I had, he knows that even today, since we don't work together, we don't work at the same company, he has my number and he will call me.
Yeah.
And he's like, I just need to talk to you for a second. And I'm like, okay, lay it on me. And I have people that I worked with 3 jobs ago that will call me and say, I just need to talk to you for a second. I'm like, okay, do we need to go get a Coke? Do we need a beer? What do we need? Where do I need to come to meet you and talk to you? Because I will. I'm honestly there for everybody and anybody who needs me. I had a funny situation, kind of funny, kind of serious situation the other night. Somebody rang the doorbell at my house. And I walk around and I look through the door. I'm like, I yell at my mom. I'm like, I don't know who this is out here. I said, there's some stranger at the door. It is somebody I've known for 10 years.
Oh.
I did not recognize him. He was going through a bad time.
Oh.
And we sat out on the front porch.
Mm-hmm.
We talked. And I'm like, are you having bad thoughts? And so we went down the mental health rabbit hole.
Yep.
And I'm like, okay, so this is what we're going to do. I was like, we got this option. We got this option. So I did call an ambulance. I told them, I said, you don't have to run hot to my house. No lights and sirens. I said, this is what we have going on. I said, but I need some help over here at my house. We need to get some help for a friend.
Oh,
and
wow.
so we called them over there. Some friends of mine were on the ambulance. I said, hey, this is what we got. I said, he did admit that he wanted to harm himself. I said, this is where we've been. This is where we need to go. I said, I've tried to reach out to mental health facilities directly.
Yeah.
We have that ability to try to take people to the most appropriate place from
Yeah.
scene. Unfortunately, they didn't have any beds, and they said
Okay.
start at the ER. So even on my day off, I'm trying to work all those angles.
Yeah.
And we did get him some help. He reached back out to me a few days later. He said, "Thank you so much.
That is
Thank
awesome.
you so much." And had he not told me who he was,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have recognized him.
Oh, wow.
He was in that bad of a way. So even when I'm not at work, I'm there for
Yeah.
anybody and everybody.
So I've never had to, outside of work on the ambulance, put someone in the direct admit or to the ER with SI or HI, any of those things. What is that like just for those that are thinking about wanting to be a peer support or kind of dipping into that next level? Because you have to accept that somebody might call you
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to have to tell them that they have to get on that ambulance or go with them to a facility to drop them off. What's that like for somebody, and how would you prep them to have that conversation, to be understanding that they're going to have to, have that hard talk?
You can't be afraid to have the hard conversations.
Mm-hmm.
That it boils down to that, and you have to be open and up on. He did not want to go. I said, "Listen," I'm like, "We will call him Tim. We will call him Joe. Whatever we want to call him. Fred is usually good because that's what I call my CPR medicine. So we'll just call him Fred.
Fred's good.
So Fred's good. So I'm like, Fred, these are the steps. This is how it is done. I said, I want you to trust me. I said, I'm going to call an ambulance. They're going to come over here. We're going to tell them to be quiet as they come. This is not a huge emergency. We're going to have them roll in here. I said, but you do need some help. I said, do you trust me that we're going to get you the help you need? I said, it may be a painful process. I said, but you will feel so much better after you go through the process.
Mm-hmm.
And so building that trust with that person is key. If it's a friend, it's one thing, but if it's your next 911 call that you go on, do you build a rapport with them, or does your partner build a rapport with them? Who builds the rapport?
Mm-hmm.
And that's usually who needs to kind of be that saving grace for that person. Unfortunately, in Arkansas, highest level provider has to ride the back of the truck.
It's ridiculous.
Unlike some other states where they can put the EMT in the back and let the paramedic drive if it is a non-emergent call. But who builds the rapport?
Mm-hmm.
That is key. So if you're the level-headed person of the duo, then fine, let you take the lead, let you talk to that person. It doesn't have to be whoever is the care provider, so to speak. You got to build rapport with them. Like, man, hey, find common ground. It's like, what kind of music you like to listen to? Are you hungry? Have you eaten something? Oh, sorry.
Oh, you're good. Keep your hand there. I just didn't want that to fall off.
So sometimes these people they might need a sandwich they haven't eaten in days. Now, unfortunately, again, as a provider, if we're taking them to the hospital, we're not supposed to give them any food. But if it's somebody you've seen multiple times, build rapport with that person any way you can. And I feel like and I said this into one of my CPR classes I was teaching one day. I said, I'm a chameleon. When it comes to providing care, I match energy.
Yep.
That is an asset, and it is a fault both.
The fault, I can see it also. I can see how it works.
I will match energy. So whatever energy they're giving me on scene, I will give that same energy back. I mean, if I need to be the cousin sailor, then I'll be the cousin sailor. If they need the hug and the compassion, how do I need to make contact with that person, and how do I reach them?
Yep.
And not everybody has the capability of doing that. And I don't want to toot my own horn and say I'm good at it, but it's just something that comes easier for me than it does other people. And that is getting on their level and being able to connect. Now, have there been people I have not been able to connect with? Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And so you do have to be careful with that. Yeah. One of my previous partners back in the day, he happened to make the rapport. It didn't seem too kosher for me as a female. I think it was a female male problem. I just simply slid in the driver's seat and I drove them to the hospital, and it was perfectly fine. Yeah. So, you have ups and downs when it comes to it. But the thing is, make that rapport with that person, and however you need to do it, do it.
Making the most of every situation. You know, that's one thing. You've seen Code 3, right?
Oh, yeah. And Code 3 is exactly what my life is like.
That's what I was about to go with.
The accidental needle sticks and all.
Well, you know, I just remember when we were working on the box together, the front of the cab was our safe space.
Mm-hmm.
It was our safe space, but it was always a wild ride every time. But you really understood how every call should be. You know, at the time, you
Mm-hmm.
hadn't had your paramedic yet. And
Yeah.
actually, when we first started working together, I didn't have my paramedic either. You know, we was really wild out there in Faulkner County. And it just kind of dawned on me how much you really were a chameleon on calls where I was struggling to make that connection. You just did it. And it really worked out and made a lot of calls easier. I hate saying
Mm-hmm.
easier because it sounds like it was just a breeze, because some of those calls we worked were not a breeze. But
Yeah.
it did make things better, you know, for the most part. There were some calls we had not so good times on,
Mm-hmm.
which is one of the things I wanted to touch on, because this year, part of what put me into a spiral there for a moment before I got counseling, you know, I had to work one of the suicides we had, our fallen firefighters this year. And me and you, one of the first times I ever worked on a colleague was with you. We
Mm-hmm.
had to go and work on a colleague that had had a misfortune while responding to a call, we'll put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
But we've never talked about what we were thinking before the call, responding to the call. We've never really talked about it out. So I kind of want to hear your side of that, because I know what I was thinking going to the call, and my brain was all over the place.
If it's the same call that I'm thinking of, it was very chaotic that day.
Yep.
We no more called in service.
Yep.
And there's like, you need to go here right now.
Oh, yeah. Dispatch made it sound horrible.
Yeah. So just getting there and assessing the scene, the carnage, honestly, neither one of us knew what we were exactly going into. But once we got there, we divided and conquered. We got it. And if I felt like and I did, I hollered at you. And I'm like, hey, I need you to come here because we got this going on. And, but I think we did it very well. We wound up not just one patient, we had two patients in the back of the truck, and got over to the hospital and got them taken care of. But it was just like, things happened so fast and so quick that it was just like, you know, it was like, what did we just do? And it was like after the fact, when all the carnage was said and done, it's just like, okay, that went pretty well, I guess, for a lot of chaos and a dumpster fire for real. You know, cots got put in back of trucks, and people got hauled to the hospital, and then one was a patient, one wasn't. Now they're both patients. So yeah, it was a lot of chaos and a lot of things. So, you know, just having two people who can bounce off of one another and make it all happen. Somehow we made it happen that day. But I don't think we really thought. We speculated. I'm like, what the heck are we going to? Because we didn't even get the radio traffic that said exactly what was happening. Because we came to work and clocked in right after it all happened. And they're like, you need to go here right now.
Yeah, we barely had our keys in hand, let alone our truck checked,
yeah, I don't even think we did truck check. I mean, it's like, you need to go right now. But yeah, I mean, it just like you get in there and you just do things left and right and you get it done. And sometimes you don't have time to think. Now I get my dispatch notes and I talk to my partner and we kind of formulate a plan on what we're going to do. And then half the time it is like, well, it's just like here recently, you and I flew somebody.
Yep.
We thought it was way worse than what it actually wound up being. So I talked and got an update on that patient.
Okay.
And they were not fortunately, they were not as seriously injured as we were speculating. And then there's a lot of things that people don't realize. We are not X-ray vision. We can't see what's going in the body. When you have snoring respirations and you're not completely coherent, we're like, head trauma. This is head trauma. We got to get you to some place that has neuro.
There was 4 critical care providers there. 4 advanced life support providers, whatever fancy term you want to use. And all 4 of us, 3 paramedics and a nurse said head trauma. Yeah, that's crazy. I didn't actually know that it wasn't that serious.
Our noggin was fine.
So it was alcohol, and they said there was no alcohol.
He did have an orbital fracture.
Okay, so he did have some damage.
Yeah.
We suspected some things were going on, but they tried to not to throw too much out there, but they tried to tell us there was only 6 fears or something like that. Yeah.
Which if there's only 6 involved here, we got a lot more head trauma going on than the brain is. But unfortunately, we can only suspect sometimes. So formulating our plan out there and communicating over the radio, you can kind of get an idea and get a game plan. But then, is it worse? Is it better? Sometimes we don't know until after they've been seen by imaging.
That's something between our camaraderie and just kind of what we've been talking about over the course of our careers. Something that I was talking about it a week ago, whenever I was in DC, whatever that was. I think it was last week. Yeah. The old school days, fire service and everybody, we sat around the kitchen table after every call because we weren't as busy then. We had time to do that. Me and you, part of what we had going, and most of my partners on the ambulance when I was working full time, we always had that debrief time in the box. After every call, we sat up front and talked about it. How much of today's culture we're going less contact for classes, all of our training's getting online. It's getting to the point where we don't have that. How much do you think that's making it where some of the numbers we're going to talk about here in a little bit is kind of growing, not really shrinking right now?
So one number in particular that comes to mind, I think, is probably shrinking. And I don't know if you have this statistic or not. What is the longevity of somebody in EMS? It is getting shorter.
Yes, it is.
It is definitely getting shorter because we don't have all the tools in our toolbox. And it's not necessarily physical tools. It is the mental game and the resources. How do we tell these people that they have options to reaching out? It's not a one-all, set-all, be done option. But I think not having as much hands-on and contact and face-to-face, they are burning out a lot quicker. And somebody was really worried about me burning out because I worked so much overtime.
Oh, gosh, but you did.
I know, like crazy, stupid amount of overtime. But there was a financial goal. My husband and I talked about a date and an age specifically for me to retire. And to get to that date, we had some financial obligations we wanted to take care of and have in place. And that's what I was working on. And, he was supportive of it, even though he didn't see me as much.
Yeah.
But a lot of people didn't realize that. But there was an end game. There's still an end game. 6 years. That is my hard number right now.
I was going to ask, what's that hard number right now? I know you got one.
Is 6 years. I'm kind of at that age now where people are starting to retire or already be out of this profession.
Yeah.
And I say I'm going to do it for 6 more years if my body holds up. And then I'm going to retire and I'm going to take those peer support certificates I have and I'm going to put them to another use.
Yeah.
I'm not going to quit. I'm going to pivot. I don't think I will ever truly retire. I think I am going to pivot and I'm going to be more of the full-time educator, peer support person is what I'm looking towards. Now, those counselors, I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. They have the things and the education and the tools. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. But if you just need somebody, and I'm like, I think you really need to talk to somebody else that has a lot more tools.
Yeah.
I want to be that person. I want to be that person who can be there for them. I want to be the mentor. I want to be the person that says, okay, you did this on a call. Might not have been the best call, but did you hurt somebody? No. Okay, let's talk through it. What are some other options? I want to be the educator. I need that for me now.
Yeah.
I want somebody to walk through some of my calls with me. I'm like, well, what could I have done different? My patient went home. They're okay. But was this the best action? No, yes, okay. What are some other options I could have done? I like it when we're able to sit down and debrief like that. I'm at a place right now that I can call that medical director. We can talk about, it's like, okay, I have never done this before, and now I had to do it. And this is how my call went.
Yeah.
I don't want to be chastised for it. I want you to educate me because we go through all this training in school. I don't want to be afraid of being criticized for doing something that's in my scope of practice that potentially helps somebody. Does that even make sense?
Oh, it makes a lot of sense. How does that? So, like for me, I'm transitioning over to counseling every 2 weeks because things at work have, I've got some good tools in my toolbox with my counselor, and we've put some better barriers in, and there's been some changes into the environment and the work pace and everything I'm doing. Now, you mentioned the change to the place you're working now, and I'm really curious because I work there part time also, and I know why I have a passion for working at that agency. But does that culture that's there, does that help where you don't need counseling as much, or does you get where I'm going with this? Where does
Yeah,
it build a better mental fortitude?
it does. I don't feel as afraid
Yeah.
to treat my
Okay.
patients.
Yeah.
They even says, "Hey, you know what? Let's talk about it. Let's
Hmm.
talk about it and discuss it." They have that open door policy, whereas before, a couple of different places I worked, we feel like we didn't have quite as much of an open door policy.
Okay.
Yes, there was some,
Hmm.
but I don't feel like it was as open as possibly could be
Yeah.
for growth and development. Um, it's hard to say. I think mentally I
Hmm.
am better. I don't work as much overtime. My mother's even commented I'm not quite as tired.
Oh.
And so yeah, I'm able to focus on the other aspects of my life. I give 100% no matter where I'm at. I
Yep.
have 5 jobs. I give 100% in all 5 of those jobs. It has helped me and developed my talents a little bit more to where I am using them in other areas. They are super supportive in growth and development. I have transitioned something I have tried to do for a couple of years. I've pulled out some of my old certificates the other day and I'm like, I started this process but never was able to finish it. I was like, okay, we'll get it done.
Oh.
And so they're able to help, foster
Yeah.
that growth and development. And then the coworkers are really great. I have coworkers of all aspects of my life that are still great, and I can call on several of them. I'm like, okay, how do we do this, and how do we get this done? And they're super supportive, and they will give me those resources if I need to, but I can't call on all of them.
Hmm.
Um, there are still questions that I have about stuff that happened 10 years ago. I'm like, well, now why did that exactly happen the way it happened?
Hmm.
Um, what could I have done better?
Yeah.
Because I've developed
Yeah.
more as a person. And so even things that I've done, even when I started volunteering, uh, I'd be like, I remember that call. It was about 25 years ago. And I'm like, if I would have known what I know now,
Yep.
how would that have turned out? So yeah, so you can armchair quarterback a lot of different things in life, but until you're actually there and do the things, you don't know. And so we can just speculate how it would have
Hmm.
come out. I do use a lot of stuff out of life practice and mesh it with what's in textbooks
Yeah.
to create those scenarios. I like to do scenario based learning. We are doing some of that next week. And we are splitting a very large class.
Yeah.
And several of us instructors are going to
Hmm.
take pieces and parts because we learn. We learn when we teach, we learn when we learn from others.
Yep.
We also learn from how a different instructor does things. You're like, oh
Yep.
my gosh, I never would have thought of doing that. And
Hmm.
and being somebody who's been in the education realm for almost 20 years now as well,
Yeah.
I still learn every day. And the downfall is your medical director is going to learn from you.
Hmm.
You're going to learn from your medical director.
Yep.
You're going to learn from your supervisors. Your supervisors are going to learn from you. You're going to
Hmm.
learn from coworkers. That right there helps mental health a lot.
Yeah.
If you have that camaraderie and you have that closeness with a lot of people that you work with and that trust, that's going to help your mental health. That's going to help your skills. That's going to help your business. It's going to help your practice. So yeah.
So the reason I asked that, and you kind of touched on it there, I was reading a Facebook comment last night, and I don't necessarily agree with it wholeheartedly, but I want your take on it. So the summation of the long little rant that they went on was that leadership is the biggest problem with mental health and first responders. Now I'll give you my take and the why behind it before you answer. Kind of let you put
Okay.
your thoughts behind it because I'm hitting you hard with it fresh. I didn't tell you this one was coming. So I think it's a problem. I think it builds in it. It makes it worse if you have bad leadership, especially a leadership that's not promoting a good culture, 100%. But I think what we see really is in how we have to process these calls and the trauma that's not normal to see as a human being. It's not normal to see people crunched up in cars or when they go through a cardiac arrest. No matter what kind of call it is, it's not normal to see that. That hits harder to me, in my opinion. Just that's my opinion. It's my opinion, folks. And then when you have bad leadership, it just makes it worse. I think if we didn't have all that trauma, bad leadership wouldn't create as much. And I say that only from the spectrum of, before I was doing this, I was a manager at Walmart. I had bad leadership. I will call it out. Can't give in too much names and stuff, but I had bad leadership. I had a coworker who was in anti-anxiety meds and all the things. I know toxic leadership, toxic culture from top down. But not to be too crude, but people weren't suicidal because of it. They just overstressed and quit their job. You know what I mean? So that's my take. I want to kind of hear yours. Now that you've kind of heard where mine is.
Yeah.
I'm a little.
So I'm gonna go back way further than that.
Okay.
From your Walmart days. So I did work for Levi's here in town.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Wait, we're going.
So we going way back.
Yeah.
We going
taking
way
it
back.
historical here.
So when I was working at Levi's, we had great leadership local.
Yeah.
It's the people who weren't there that were sending down all the rules and regulations and all the plans that we're going to restructure. It's going to make, Levi's great again.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it failed.
Yep.
Because the plant has not been there in quite some time.
We'll go with quite some time. We're all going to throw dates.
Yeah, before the first number of the year was a 2, it was a 1 back then. So, yes, so I'm going to agree with that, and I'm going to take that way back to just like manufacturing, EMS, your retail stores. If you don't have leadership that's trustworthy and can give you resources and be there, in owning your own business, I will not ask anybody who works for me and helps me to do anything that I'm not willing to do myself.
100%.
And a lot of our leadership these days, I think, they get a little too high and they forget what their roots are. Yep. They forget what their roots are, or they were promoted to that position without knowing how to come up through the ranks and what people go through. And I'm not faulting people for that, because there are people that are great in a lot of those positions. Yep. But I think it will make them a much better leader if they knew what it took to go through the ranks and what it meant to work on a truck, what it meant to sit in an office, watch those security cameras, because I know you worked in loss prevention.
Yep.
Do you have the gumption to have, because those people have to have the harder conversations.
Yeah.
Do you want to be buddy with, and it's almost like parenting these days. And I'm going to talk because I teach college students.
Yep.
And I run on a lot of kids, and they have very young parents. We want to be buddy with our coworkers, our kids.
Yep.
And we don't want to parent, and we don't want to lead.
Oh, yeah.
And I think if they stopped trying to be liked so much, being liked and having respect are 2 totally different things.
Oh, yeah. Very different.
You can be an a-hole and be respected.
Yep.
You can be friends, buddy, and then once you are forced to do something from people higher up, you're automatically the bad guy. You're playing favorites. You don't do things like you're supposed to. So I do think if we did stop being buddy and friends with, yes, you can be friends with people, but the thing is, if you stop trying so hard to befriend and lead, because your parents need to be leaders also. Yeah. You need to lead your children. Otherwise, they're the heathens at Walmart, and you're coming to see them. But I think if we lead more in this country, in every aspect, I think you're going to see more respect and more camaraderie. I'm going to use that word instead of being liked.
Yeah.
Because you can be the most unliked person But if you do things fair and you actually lead and you get in the trenches, you're going to be respected for
I think we both can name a name that we're both thinking about as somebody that really hit home on that, because, you know, leaders are not always liked, but they're always respected if led right. And that
it.
you hit right on where I was going with that. Like, but to hear the way some people are toting it is just, you know, I guess it's life experience. We both have a lot of life experience, and that makes a big difference. And that's a big reason why, when we were talking earlier, I wanted to talk a little bit on what can we do for these younger kids, because they don't have the life experience, they don't have leaders. So we're hopefully they listen to this and they take heed on it, that, you know, they can have some things better stored and tools in the toolbox, and maybe we'll shape some better young leaders out there for tomorrow, because
Yeah, absolutely.
we've both seen what the other side of this is like if you don't have it, and it's tough times. I do want to talk some numbers before I let you get out of here today, because they're crazy. I don't have the exact latest study on the burnout ratio. I know the last time I looked, it was 5 to 7 years, which it used to be about 10 years.
Yeah, and
So
I think
it's trending.
it's gonna be 5 and under now.
It,
I think you're gonna
I don't
top
want
out
to.
around 5.
I don't want to see that number.
I don't either. I love my job. Honestly, love my job. And I'm going to be in it well beyond the 5. I'm already in it well beyond the
Oh
5
yeah.
years. But the thing is you got these people who go from EMT straight to medic into the field, and they don't stop and breathe in between.
Yep.
Those are the ones who are burning out because they don't know how to handle the different stresses. They don't have the tools and, I guess, the resources to constructively. There's a destructive and a constructive. If they can constructively deal with their feelings,
Yeah.
they will last longer.
Oh yeah.
And as a Gen Xer, we've done the destruction when we were kids. We've learned how to construct things out of popsicle sticks and twigs. So, I think we're a hardier generation, and the kids today, they haven't had that hardiness.
Yeah.
And so they burn out a little quicker.
They're rushing to the finish line, which is really what I think part of one of these numbers when I look at it, and it's 72% worry about confidentiality. And I wrote a little comical here. Someone's mental health is not about the T. You know, it's the hip term. You know, what's the T going on right now? And when we talk about the rush now, you know, everyone's looking for the quick gimmicks, right? Quick gimmicks, quick end, big money payouts. I wonder if that's not why that's part of the problem, because they're like, oh, I can turn one over on him because I'm already struggling, because we all rushed to be a paramedic together. No one took time to learn how to be underneath the paramedic, so you knew what your partner should do. You know, it's so many layers, but those layers really start compounding.
Yeah.
The other one that's really interesting, 85% of first responders have experienced the symptoms of mental health problems. Not diagnosed with PTSD, not, you know, they just had a moment of anxiety, you know, like on code 3, we lean down against the cooler. We've all done it. We've all been there.
Yep.
We've all had that crazy call.
And quite honestly, I'm surprised, and that's only reported.
Yeah. This is all just reported.
I'm sure that number in reality is higher.
Yeah.
You know, if it's not in the 90s, I think you got not a true accurate number.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have at least one call that makes you ooh, then what? You're a robot, and we're not robots. We're human beings with souls, and something is going to affect us. So I'm honestly surprised that number wasn't just a tiny bit higher.
You know, I was surprised also. I was surprised that they actually did a study on this, and they did this out of Phoenix. So it was awesome that they did it, but being that big of a metro and not having it be higher, because you know the calls out there. We've all seen and heard the numbers and the statistics and deaths and all that in these bigger metros, and we know what we experience in some of our smaller metros that we work. So I can't imagine what they're dealing with and working with in the volume. They're not working 48-hour shifts out there.
No, their call volume is so astronomically crazy that they couldn't.
No. Another one here. Kind of want your input on this. This is something that was why I was in DC. 80% report stigma as a major barrier and why they don't seek mental health.
And honestly, I'm surprised that wasn't reported higher.
Mm-hmm.
And again, you got to think these are reported cases, not the people they
Yeah.
didn't talk to. So I honestly am surprised. What exactly was that number? See, and I think your front number is going to be a 9 on that one as well.
Yeah.
I,
Easily,
mhm.
especially around here.
Yeah, if you polled the people honestly around here, you're gonna get in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
I have every confidence because I know so many people, and it doesn't matter what service you work for.
Yeah.
Because we're a tight knit group. We go
Oh,
to the
yeah.
conferences. We know each other. We're neighbors. We work and live in each other's counties. So knowing those people, and especially being somebody who is open and free for them to talk to,
Mm.
I'm very surprised that number's not higher.
I wasn't always, you've known me for a while, so you knew me before I was open with mental health and everything else. But seeing this number, and then whenever I was, telling everyone my struggles and I was going to counseling, how many were privately coming and discussing it with me. Some were open about it, but a lot of them were so private about it.
Mm-hmm.
Hidden phone calls or pulling me to the side. To see that it's only 80%, I don't know of a single one that was truly open. I've yet to be in a meeting or a news thing or anything where someone was just open. It doesn't happen.
And this is horrible to say this, but then I hope you're fortunate if you are starting your career in EMS, you are a current volunteer, you're planning on going and working your way up, and if you've ever been involved in an incident and they offer a debrief, for God's sake, do it.
Yep.
You will be so thankful that you did it, because if that debrief is run way it should be run,
Mm-hmm.
only the people involved in that incident are in the room.
Yep.
No outsiders are invited
Mm-hmm.
or can be in there, because it's a need to know, and it is the feelings of those people.
Yep.
I have done that in a room full of firefighters, and being the only paramedic in there who worked the person
Mm-hmm.
who, it was a cardiac arrest, bad situation. I was the paramedic on scene. Me, my partner were invited because we were in the back of the truck. We were there. We worked it.
Yep.
And I had such a different outlook on support and debriefs after that.
Mm-hmm.
And I understood what everybody else felt. And they were in a safe space, and they were able to say, I seen my wife. I seen my mother when we pulled this person out of the house. I seen somebody who needed help. I
Yep.
seen somebody who reminded me of my daughter, and so that makes you realize how it hits
Yep.
with other people. And for it to be a closed debrief was a very rich and rewarding experience. Now, I hope you're never in a spot that you have to do that.
Oh,
But
God, yes.
please do not pass up that opportunity.
And I believe, if I'm remembering the situation you're talking about, and I'll get too detailed, that was through RLEAP, because you had the certain individuals in house.
Yes.
So
Yes.
for those of you listening, if you are in the Arkansas region, RLEAP is a free program to call in. They bring in counselors, EMDR, ART, all the things, depending on what level you need. It's Arkansas Law Enforcement Assistance Program. They are amazing. They take care of you every time.
Mm-hmm.
We use them here locally, and they truly are confidential, and it really does. So whenever I was going through my bout earlier this year, we did our debrief for the fire, and I still had a few more days until I got into my first counseling session, and I'd had an hour on the phone, but really, what's an hour whenever you got a lot you're unpacking because
Mm-hmm.
you've been acting like you don't need help for a while. So that debrief actually was the first time after that I really slept, and it was 40 something hours
Mm-hmm.
that I went without sleep, like true sleep. They help. God, do they help? Which was crazy because I'd been through, I don't know how many of them you've done, but I've been through quite a few. But I've never really talked to many of them. Kind of talked a little bit, but that was the first one. I actually opened it up, and it's my story, so I can tell it. It's the only reason why we're talking about that portion. And it was hard, but even getting to the point where I did helped me just that little bit. Every time you talk about the struggles, it helps. And that little bit was really just that little edge I needed to get to sleep, which was really cool
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't realize, and it was the first moment I first actually started thinking about this, that what I had with you and every other partner I worked with was really what kept me from never having, you know, true. I mean, I had too much stress and I probably needed some counseling maybe once a month or every couple of months. But just having that partner that I always debriefed every call with, how critical that was. And where
Mm-hmm.
now I'm by myself. I work in the fire chief, so I don't have a partner riding with me. So
Right.
I get in the truck and I go back to doing the
Mm-hmm.
job. Go back to the phone calls and the political fires, or all the theoretical fires I have to do, and paperwork I have to get done. It's crazy how much you rely on that.
Mm-hmm.
You don't even realize it.
You
So,
don't. And if you have one of those partners who's very closed off and it's like, hey, I'm the paramedic, I'm the one in the back, I'll do everything, you just get in the driver's seat. That's not a partnership. That's a dictatorship.
yep.
The thing is you've got to have that connection with the person that you are putting your life in their hands and theirs in yours
Mm-hmm.
when you go on each and every one of these calls. If that cab is not your safe space, then you probably need a new partner.
Yep.
And find one that works, because that is your first go-to. Get in the cab of that truck, and that is your safe space. And that I am a firm believer in.
So what would you tell people? Would you tell them just to switch partners? Or would you tell them to try to work through that with their partner? Because maybe their partner's in that position where they need that.
Definitely try to work it out with that partner. We don't want to just abandon people on a whim. I mean, you go through the process and you have the conversations like, hey, notice this. Anything I can do to make it better? I'd love to have a partnership versus, and I'm not afraid to use the term dictatorship. I'm like,
be straightforward with
yeah,
it.
be straightforward, because if you beat around the bush, they really don't know exactly what you're asking.
Yep.
And you have to have that safe space to have that honest communication. And if it doesn't go anywhere, then yeah, you may have to ask for, and there's no shame in asking, because people's personalities don't always mesh. I will tell you, if you are in leadership, take personality test. What is your personality? There's different kinds of things out there. One of the big ones is the DISC. And I found out that I am a parrot. I'm a parrot dove. So I'm a very caring, animated person, but I'm happy. I'm happy about being animated, and I'm happy about being a caring person. It told my coworkers who I was, because the eagles and the owls are the observers and the dictators.
Yep.
And I was a dove parrot. So that one that I did use birds as acronyms, and who they signified who you were. But, encourage those of you who are in top leadership that may be listening to this, take the personality tests.
Yep.
What kind of leader are you? Because you might be surprised that we may have a lot more eagles and owls out there than we do have the doves and the parrots.
Mm-hmm.
The other terms, I think they used them as a dominant personality versus the compassionate leader. Take one of those. And if you have a small team that works together, all of you take it. All of you take it. That way you know how to communicate with each other. And that's another way to that trickle down effect.
You mentioned that. I kind of forgot about it. Probably shouldn't. I'm a beaver or something. So it was the same test, but just different. Otter, animals. Beavers, lions. I think it was beaver lion is what mine was. So I was a compassionate listener with some dictatorship or some enforcement. I think is how it was worded. I have to look at my notes from my executive fire officer class, but it was really eye-opening because we separated into our groups of those people. And, it's all fire chiefs around the state that I've been to conferences with. So we were really looking at each other and it's like, oh yeah.
Yeah, that fits you. Yeah, that's you.
So it was really cool to see, but it also let me internally know that, this is where my point is that, yes, I'm more compassionate. I'm not as, a hard dictator kind of a personality, but I do still have some leaning traits that direction. So I have to be mindful of that. Do I more lean towards being compassionate and listening? Yes. But it was a good reinforcement for me as a leader currently to know, hey, I can still be that guy that comes top down heavy if I'm not careful. So it was cool to actually see. And then the names and everything else are just fun to play with. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, they were.
So we've been talking for quite a while. Is there anything that we haven't talked about or something you want to tell the people out there that just, or a question for me even that just really you want to end with that we didn't really kind of touch on. We've touched on a lot of stuff.
We have touched on a lot of stuff. I mean, just have those open ears and communication. And I know if there's ever a reason that I need to call you,
Yep.
you will answer. And,
Oh,
and
yeah.
having friends like that in your back pocket is great to have. Have that person that you can pick up that phone and talk to. And if you don't, know that there's other resources. Know where to find those resources.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? As much as you want to work for a company, it may not. I mean, you interview a company as well as they interview you when you go to work for
100%.
them. I will encourage you, if you do get into EMS, go in there with a list of questions when you go for your interview. And that's one thing that people don't do, is they don't ask enough questions. I myself don't ask enough questions.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to do that. Because if you're not a right fit and they're not a right fit, then you're going to be miserable. And find that place where you are a good fit.
I will say, earlier today I was recording the origin story for myself, just kind of how I got to where I'm at. And that was one of the first times when I was interviewing for this job that I actually did that and actually put time into when I was offered the job, didn't just rush to take it.
Mm-hmm.
I spent a few days thinking about it, thinking about the questions I was asked, what direction they're looking for and how I would go that direction, and also what they're doing back for me, that good balance. And it was one of those rare times where I didn't put money or benefits. I just looked at the job and the future it was going to give me, and was it actually meeting my needs? And I'll tell y'all, best thing I ever did. First time I ever done it, I probably didn't ask enough questions, because you never really ask enough.
Right.
You never really do. But it was the first time I'd ever actually asked any, or ever took any time to make a decision on a job. And it was one of the coolest things, because I look back on it earlier today and I was sitting here and I was like, I actually truly thought of a job, not just what's that dollar amount.
Right.
We do that so often in EMS and fire and law enforcement, dispatchers, all first responders do it. We're so clued into that dollar amount that is that really the most important thing?
Yeah. I am in the season of life where I want to be happier.
Yep.
I have let those financial goals, I think I'm still going to obtain those financial goals in my life. I think I'm working on happiness, working on me finally for the first time. And I'm very happy in where I am in my life. And I know I have all the resources that I now need that I didn't have before, because I knew who to go talk to. And I think everybody has that in them. You just have to think about it. I think you have to ask those questions like you just said. It's like we think about this and we get zoned in on it and we don't ask those questions. And I look at life. So there's this little TikTok thing. And so it's this guy talking about the 3 lanes on the interstate. It's like, yeah, this is for the people who want to go slow and they want to follow the rules. The middle lane is for those people who's trying to get somewhere. That other lane that people hang out in, that is for the lane that people have ticket money. And that's where I'm at in life. I am in that fast lane because I've got my ticket money and I'm just looking for the happiness now.
Yep.
And I think I'm finally there.
That's good to hear. I'm glad. That was the only thing I was going to ask out of everything, because from day one when I met you to now, you seem happier. You do seem like you're more well-rounded. When I talk to you and see you, you're not. A year and a half ago when I seen you, was hustling, bustling, scrambling, a little frazzled. And I'm not trying to throw you out there, because we've all been there. We have our ups and downs. But, it's just how happy are you today?
Because I found that counseling that worked for me.
Yeah. That's what worked for me.
Yep.
I tell y'all, counseling, it's where it's at. Barb, I appreciate it.
No
It's been
problem.
Good. Guys, this is Beyond the Turnouts.